Welcome to the November 4th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm David Morassutti, and to my left is Mike DiStefano. And on today's show, we'll tee up a back-to-back for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a crucial one after their win over the Philadelphia Flyers. That and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from SportsCenter, a writer for the NHLPA, and to my left is my co-host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch, as well as Alice Brothers on TSN's Overdrive. We have lots to discuss on today's edition of Locked On Leafs with a big weekend of games coming up. The Boston Bruins are in town, and then we got the Carolina Hurricanes on the road for a Saturday-Sunday showdown. Just remember that Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. And now you can catch us up on YouTube, so make sure you go and subscribe on YouTube to get your daily fix for all things Leafs right here on Locked On Leafs. Now, also just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And Mike, we know we're coming off a pretty decent victory over the Philadelphia Flyers, one that kind of smoothed things over, get a chance to breathe a little bit here in Leafs Nation. We get to breathe only to realize that the juggernaut is a coming. We got the Boston Bruins on Saturday. The bad Bruins, the ones that have been running roughshod across the NHL this season, and the Carolina Hurricanes, who have also been very good this season. So just when you think it's getting a little, get a chance to relax a little bit, no dice. It's just going to get that much harder for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, it's going to, which is why I think that the win last night was so important, right? The win that they were able to get in Philly, or against Philly in Toronto rather, was honestly just they needed to stop the bleeding and start to get a little bit of that swagger back in their system. And I think we saw that towards the end of the game. You know, what we saw with the fight, Gio kind of coming in, helping his teammate out. And you saw Matthews, even before that, make a nice little between the legs kind of move, tried to, just something that you don't try unless you're feeling yourself, right? Unless you get a little bit of confidence and swagger back. And it seems like that's what's happening with this club now. And you're going to need it when you're going up against the Boston Bruins. And that's how I think Toronto wants to play. They want to play loose. They want to play up tempo with pace. And that can really only work for them when they are confident. So it was a big game and a big win for them to get against Philly. But you're right. It's absolutely going to be a couple of crucial games this upcoming weekend. They've got Boston Saturday, but then Carolina on Sunday too. So you've got two tough games against two top-tier opponents. And Boston's right now like the number one team in the league. I mean, like this team just does not lose games. They're 10-1 on the year, 10-1. They just went beat up on the on the New York Rangers. They've won 7 in a row coming into Toronto, a plus 22 goal differential. So this ain't going to be an easy out, which is insane to even think about. Like before the season, we thought Boston, at least the first 2 months, were going to be one of the teams that were going to maybe come out of the gate a little slow, right? The Marchand injury, the McAvoy injury, Matt Grzelcyk. Well, all of a sudden, you got Marchand, who's like a month and a half ahead of schedule. He's now playing games already. We got McAvoy, who's already skating. And they're the top team in the NHL, 10-1 through 11 games. And now they roll into Toronto on fire, and the Maple Leafs are going to really get their first test, their first taste of what, top caliber hockey is like this season. I guess you could say Vegas. Vegas was a pretty good squad, but now they'll really get tested, right? Like Philly, not much of a test, to be quite honest. This is going to be a much different situation, and I'll be curious to see how they can come into this game and if they're going to be in the fight the whole way.
Yeah, I think that's the big one there, right? Boston's not giving up anything easily. We know that the good thing is that Timothy Liljegren is set to likely return on Saturday. Like all signs are pointing to him coming back. So the Leafs will be getting a nice little boost there. But it's also you look at Boston, they've been doing this, without Brad Marchand for a good part of the season,
Yeah.
without Charlie McAvoy. Like this is a team that yeah, I had written off as, a top 3 in the Atlantic, maybe a wild card team. I thought they were going to take a step back a little bit because, guys are getting a bit older. They got a new coach. I didn't expect Jim Montgomery to be the Boston Bruins whisperer to start the season.
Yeah, really.
I still remain bullish on their goaltending, and Linus Ullmark has proven to be, a top end goaltender in this league right now. So everything is going well for the Bruins. And they're perfect at home. Pardon?
Pasternak has been unbelievable so far this year too.
It's a
Like he's got
contract
eight.
year for him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and he wants to make as much money as possible. He had 18 points so far through 10 games. 18 points in 10 games. And like the thing about them is they're actually getting like contributions from a lot of different people. Like they've got 9 players with 6 or more points so far this year. So they're getting a lot of scoring from up and down their lineup, which isn't necessarily something we could say about Toronto, but they've got 9 guys with 3 or more goals so far on the year. You've got a guy like AJ Greer who's got 3, Foligno, DeBrus. You've got Hampus Lindholm who's got 11 points so far. He's actually having a great start to the season. Charlie Coyle's got 4 goals. Like they're just getting a lot of input from everyone. So Toronto in this game is going to have to be on their toes. Lines 1 through 4, pairings 1 through 3. They're all going to have to be on their A game when the Boston Bruins roll into town.
Heck, even Nick Foligno looks like an NHL player again, right? Like
Yeah.
many thought that he was going to be on, wondering how could the Bruins get rid of that contract, and he has 5 points in 10 games. Like it's not what I expected from Nick Foligno. Nick Foligno, I didn't even think was going to be a regular in the lineup, and he's played in every game.
We should note that Timothy Liljegren actually is going to return, and he will be in this game. So it'll be the return of Timothy Liljegren for this one against the Boston Bruins. So I would assume, obviously, we're recording this Thursday night, so we don't have the practice lines yet. It was an off day today for the Maple Leafs, so we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but our expectation is that Victor Mete was more of a placeholder on that blue line, and we're going to see Timothy Liljegren slot right back in next to Morgan Riley, and that'll be the pairing. And then Hull and Brody will continue to be a pair, and then Sandin and Mark Giordano will be another pair. But I'm curious what you think that Sheldon Keefe should do with the forward group. Do you think that coming off of what was probably their best game of the year, do you keep that entire group intact, or do you think about maybe putting a guy like Nick Robertson back in? I know there was a little bit of flack coming from some media members who felt that scratching Nick Robertson wouldn't help with his development and would like to see him back into the lineup. But I mean, after seeing the results of the game on Wednesday, you can't help but feel like you should just toss him back out there again. And maybe this is a nucleus that just works.
Yeah, it's always coaches don't like to tinker too much with a winning lineup, but I mean, bringing Nick Robertson back in isn't like you're not making a massive move there.
Well, where are you going to put him?
That's the other question, right? It's like who comes out? Jack Aston scored in the last game. Like, is he the one? It always seems like it's kind of him and Morgan are like kind of the interchangeable. So if like you're taking, Morgan out, is going to be for Robertson.
You want Robertson on your fourth line? Like,
yeah, exactly. And that's the other problem. Is like,
I thought Mulligan actually played really well against Philadelphia. Like that fourth line did like a 92 expected goals for that game. Like,
so, and then the other thing too is there's a back-to-back and it's a road game and it's very short. No, it's a earlier start, 5:00 start. So maybe that's where Sheldon Keefe says, you know what, we'll save Robertson for one of those games. You can make that lineup switch there. Fortunately, the Leafs will be able to do that a little bit more with the extra roster space that they do have right now. So yeah, so I think the right now the key is you got to make sure that whatever lineup you put up against Boston, you got to go, as you said, top to bottom. There's no hole in the Bruins roster you can really expose too much. Um, so you got to make sure that whatever lineup you're putting out is going to be the best lineup that you can dish out in this type of game. So we're going to actually take a short break because I do want to talk about the Carolina matchup because we got a good scouting report on Boston, but now we got to get the other opponent in this matchup. So we're going to do that on the other side. Before we do, Mike, let's hear from one of our show sponsors, and it's today's title sponsor, BetOnline.net.
Yeah, absolutely. It's your number one source for betting a football, hockey, basketball, whatever you're betting on this year. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with Mike DiStefano. And just a reminder, Locked On Leafs is available wherever you get your podcast from. So make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you keep on getting we want to get that YouTube subscriber count up. So just continue to hit that button. Tell all your friends as well. We like to, and you can also join the Discord group. It was pretty active. It's been pretty active lately. I haven't looked to see actually. Sometimes we get a little active during Oilers games too, and I don't know if you caught Mike. The Oilers up 3-2,
They're up
late
3-1. They're up
3-1,
3-1, and then
three,
yeah, it was 3-2. Sorry. They were up 3-1, then it was 3-2.
and then
But yeah, then the Devils score twice in 7 seconds, take a 4-3 lead, end up getting the W. I know a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf fans really do smile when they see Edmonton Oilers lose. And the Devils, though, like they're for real. They're coming into Toronto, I think next week and the week after. Like they
I'll
got
be
2
going to
games.
that game actually.
Yeah, they got 2 games against the Devils in the next couple of weeks here, and that's a good hockey team right now. Like all the underlying numbers, that's one of the best teams in the NHL currently as it sits. Just the way that they've been playing is great. Lindy Ruff has that team playing exceptionally well right now.
And it
So
wasn't too long ago that Lindy Ruff was getting the boo birds during
But it
the.
made no sense because if you looked at all of the numbers, like I remember having this conversation with Ross on the Locked On NHL National Show, which we do every Wednesday, by the way, for a full Eastern Conference roundup. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, I don't get why he's getting the Boo Birds 2 games in. Sure, they were 0-2, but all the underlying numbers suggested that they were the better team in both of those games. The product on the ice, the process, I suppose, was there. And it was just a matter of those results coming through. And oh, they're coming through now. They're definitely coming through now, and they're one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. I think they've gone on to win 8 of 9 since the Boo Birds came out after those 2 games, including a win tonight. And yeah, so they're going to be a tough challenge in the coming weeks for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But also, like that's why I think it's so. It's going to be an interesting next few weeks. Like this weekend, Boston, we chatted about them, but now it's Carolina, right? Like Carolina's the
Another
very
team
next
that's doing
day.
really well. Like they're the kings of the analytics numbers. If you like look at what makes them successful, and you got you talked about the Devils and how good they've been. The
Well, they're
Hurricanes are
third.
right behind them for second in that division.
They're third in the NHL in expected goal differential. So that's right. Like they're third. The Devils are first at 65%. Carolina's at 60%. They're third, and that's only like by 0.09% behind the second place Panthers. Leafs currently 8th at 53%. So yeah, the Carolina Hurricanes like that's a top tier squad. They always have been for the last little bit now. And they're going to be sitting there rested, right? They don't play on Saturday. So they're going to be a rested team waiting for Toronto to roll in late night. They're not going to get through customs and get to bed until probably early, in the morning. Technically, it'll be morning by then. and then it's a 5 o'clock start, which makes zero sense to me.
None.
How do you allow a 5 o'clock start knowing that there's a team who has to travel cross border the night before? This makes zero sense.
Like I was wondering, maybe are like the Carolina Panthers playing? Like, no, the Carolina Panthers are on their bye.
Well, that
So
would
like,
also have nothing to do with like they
yeah.
don't play in the same arena either. So like
Well,
that makes
sometimes like are like, we saw it with Seattle where like they move the games so that they don't conflict with other, like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out some reason. The NHL doesn't make sense when they do their schedules. We've
no.
already learned that.
Well,
But
they don't want. Okay, I do know the reason. They don't want to compete with Sunday night football.
uh,
That's the real reason, right? They don't want to have to compete with the Sunday nighter. They're okay with competing with the 4 o'clock slate. It's the Sunday night or the primetime game that they don't want to have to compete with. That's probably the real reason.
yeah, it's not a great reason, but um lo and behold, I mean, the Carolina Hurricanes, when we're recording this obviously on Thursday, they will be playing the Buffalo Sabres on Friday. But currently,
Okay.
they're on a 3-game winning streak. They just beat the Tampa Bay Lightning 4-3 in a shootout, and like this team has had some really good wins, some weird losses. Like they had a 6-2 loss to the Islanders, which is the last team I would expect to beat the Carolina Hurricanes 6-2.
Dude,
But
the Islanders are off to a good start to the year
I
too,
know,
though. This like if you go and
like,
actually look at the NHL standings right now, everything's so flipped and backwards to what we've been accustomed to the last few years. Like just really quickly, I suppose we can go and take a look at it. Actually, I'll share the screen. I know we're going way off topic here, but I
oh,
think
sorry.
it's just it's insane what's going on right now with the NHL early on in the season. Now it's
Yeah.
still early. But like you look in the Metropolitan, right? You've got the Devils up at top. Yeah, you got the usual suspects, Carolina Hurricanes. But boom, there's the out right there. So is it that bizarre to lose a game to the Islanders? They're 7-4 this year with a plus 14 goal differential. They've won 5 games in a row. They are Lane Lambert has his team playing for the New York Islanders, and then obviously Rangers. But down low, you've got Washington, Pittsburgh, two staples in the playoffs for many, many years. Again, there's still a ways to go in this season. I am not in any means suggesting that it's going to finish out this way. But then you go and look at this division, the Atlantic. Buffalo up there, 7-3 so far on the year, 14 points, good for second in the division. Detroit's up in the top here, and then here's Toronto and Florida, who've been staples the last couple of years in the playoffs. Falling behind, a little bit of a slow start. The Western Conference, same thing. If I would have told you that Chicago would be in a playoff spot 11 games into the year, you'd think that I was crazy. Like that's a team you could say, what are they, 1-10? Like that would have been kind of the thought process there. Meanwhile, Colorado, 500 hockey club so far, a little bit of a hangover. Look at the St. Louis Blues, 3-6, 3-6 for the St. Louis Blues. They can't buy a win. They lost again tonight. They can't win on home ice either. They're 1-4 on home ice. Look at that. That's insane. With 6 straight losses, by the way, for the St. Louis Blues. Seattle Kraken, third place in the Atlantic or in the Pacific over there. You've got Calgary. It's everything is just so upside down to what it typically is. It's just wild. It's a little rant that I wanted to make, but it's just something that I had noticed early on in the year. The amount of parity that's going on in the NHL. And mainly I want to make that point too, to talk about some of the other teams who are at the bottom and who are kind of stubbed their toe out of the gate like Toronto has. So it hasn't just been Toronto, who's a team with high expectations, who's played poorly out of the gate. It's been St. Louis. It's been Colorado. Up until the last couple of games, it was Tampa Bay, although they've come back to win a couple here. And like there's a couple of teams out there who just aren't, who have gotten off to a bit of slower starts than I think we anticipated. Minnesota's another team out there that you could say. Obviously, Pittsburgh, they've lost like 4 in a row. They've got up 6 goals 3 times in their last 6 games. I think they've lost 6 in a row, actually, now I think about it. Yes, it's really bizarre what's going on early in the National Hockey League.
Well, and I know you want to talk about that a little bit yesterday, but we wanted to keep the episode short. And like even Calgary has dropped a few games in a row, and like
Yeah.
that's just not something you'd expect to see, considering how hot they were to start the year. And maybe that's really the issue there. It's like, you know, when there's like when you get off to such a hot start, there's only so much you can do to maintain it, right? Like you got to
Mhm.
get unworthy play from like your goaltenders. Your stars have to continue to produce that. You know, in some ways, a level play that's just not sustainable, right? Am I going to expect Tage Thompson to score 6 points every night for the Buffalo Sabres? Probably not. You
Yeah,
know,
good
like,
chance it's not gonna happen.
you're seeing a lot of like just performances unlikely performances to start the year, which is kind of why when you saw what the Leafs did against Philadelphia, it looked more like the Leafs from the preseason, right? When they were, displaying their dominance a little bit. And that's why I think like that game was so important because they needed that confidence going into these two games,
Yeah.
especially Carolina. I'm sure many remember what happened early in the season last year when they lost to Carolina. I think it was like 4-1, and they looked so out of it. Like there were some people who were calling for Sheldon Keefe's head at that point in
Oh,
that game. Like they just looked like they didn't look like a competitive team at that point. Like, and so I think having that bit of confidence is so crucial, and that's why certain teams are going through these highs and lows because confidence is a big thing right now. With why are the Seattle Kraken doing well? They feel confident because last year there was a lot of luck that wasn't going their way. Goaltending wasn't really doing well for them. Now they're getting a little bit of that, and it's making a difference, right?
yeah.
So
Martin Jones got a shutout tonight. Martin Jones
yeah,
against Minnesota, like a good hockey team. So I'm saying the parity is actually insane in the NHL right now. But I guess, well, funny enough, I think we got to take one more break, and then we can break down the Carolina Hurricanes because we kind of went off the rails a little
yeah,
bit
we'll
there.
break down the Carolina Hurricanes. We'll give her like keys to the game for. We'll do this. We'll do keys to the game for the Bruins, keys to the game for the Hurricanes, and then I do want to bring up one thing, and that's involving an important prospect for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Fraser Minten, the Leafs'
Mm,
first pick in the 2022 NHL draft. We got some updates from him, so we'll do that on the other side. But Mike, let's give our second sponsor a little bit of a shout out here.
Yeah, it's Simply Safe. It's one of our favorites here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. If you thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up right now. Locked On Leafs listeners can order the number one rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. It's the biggest offer of the year. You will not want to miss it. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spiked nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by US News and World Report, a third year in a row. And in an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threats are real so you can get priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend. Get 50% off at the new Simply Safe systems at simplysafe.com/locked on NHL today. It's the biggest discount of the year, so you won't want to wait. That's simplysafe.com/locked on NHL. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with Mike DiStefano, and we went on a little bit of a tangent there in the second segment there, but we're gonna bring it all back to home.
That's my bad. That's my bad
It's
on
all
that one.
good, all good.
That's my bad on that one, Coach.
It's okay. You know what? I usually don't drive the bus. I'm getting a little bit of a learning experience here, so I now know. Don't let Mike get onto his little tangents with analytics and stuff. But it's okay. It's okay. We got to keep we got a nice flow going here. We're gonna
It's
keep it going.
information. I like to provide enough, a lot of information for the listeners and
Oh,
the
yeah,
viewers of this program, and not just of the Leafs, mainly of the Leafs, but also a little bit of league wide stuff.
yeah. Context is very important, right? Sometimes people think we live in too much of a bubble here in Toronto. Nah, nah. We
No,
like to expand our horizons a little bit.
we
But
cover it all.
to help kind of focus on these two games here, maybe we'll just give like a three keys. Do we want to do? I was wondering, do we want to do three keys for each game, three keys for the weekend? Maybe we want.
We
How do
could
you want? How
probably
do you
keep it
want?
to we could probably keep it to the weekend because I think when you look at these two teams, like they're somewhat similar where it's just like these are litmus test games, right? Like I think that you're just going in there, there's pretty good goaltending, they've got pretty good defense, and they've got some superstars, right? Like you've got the perfection line in Boston, and they've got, Aho, Svechnikov, you've got some real scoring threats. Martin Nakash has been unbelievable for the Carolina Hurricanes so far this year. So if I'm thinking about, okay, what should some of the keys to the game be for these guys? I mean, you got to try and limit the offense. You got to have smart gaps. You got to gap up and make sure that you don't get beat off the rush, and that guys like Pasternak and Taylor Hall and Martin Nakash and Aho and Svechnikov don't beat you for like odd man rushes, right? You don't want to allow those breakaway chances. Stay on top of pucks, keep those smart gaps, and try and keep the guys in front of you. And then that will allow you to, the defenseman, the blue line I'm referring to, should allow them to be able to play those guys a little bit better, and hopefully limit the offense from the opposition, which is extremely strong for both of those squads.
Yeah, like when you see how the Bruins play, they like to take advantage of any mistake. That
Mm-hmm.
and Carolina's that way too, right? You know, and the Leafs have been very guilty of that all season long. Turnovers leading to odd man rushes, odd man chances. The Bruins love odd man rushes. Like I every time I watch a Bruins highlight, it's almost like, why do you want to give the Bruins free reign to have an easy chance on that? Why? Why do you want to do that? But that's because the Bruins are relentless. So I
Yeah.
think that's a key for the Leafs is you got to have that intensity from the start of the game. If you don't have that intensity, Boston is going to walk all over you.
Kind of got to treat it the way they treated the Winnipeg game,
Yeah.
right? I think if you treat that game against Boston that way, I think that the team will have a much better opportunity to come out with the 2 points than if they, play the way they have, I guess, the last couple of weeks, which has not been great, which I don't anticipate. I think things are starting to kind of turn for the Maple Leafs. Like we said, they kind of got their swagger back with that win against Philadelphia. You saw them doing some things that they weren't doing offensively a little bit. I think the fight that broke out maybe helped galvanize the team in a way. I know Sheldon Keefe touched on that after the game and said that that's something that could kind of, really help with the culture within the room. And the culture is a big word when it comes to both of these teams. The
Yeah.
Boston Bruins, the legitimate, like that is the epitome of setting culture. And I think the Carolina Hurricanes have done a good job of that too with Rob Brindamore over the last few seasons. They've been one of the best teams as well. So yeah, it's going to be tough. I think you're right though. The intensity has to be there for 60 minutes, right from puck drop. Start on time, and that is going to be a necessity against these two teams because they are consistent and they do play with tenacity, and they play a 60-minute game. And if you're not willing to match that, the Leafs will have no shot this weekend.
Yeah.
So they're gonna need to.
And the Bruins and Hurricanes have been getting decent goaltending. So you're
Freddie.
not going to get the Flyers backup who hasn't won a single game this season. You're going to get prime A and prime A goaltending. So that's another key for me is that you just got to not just throw pucks on net, because I feel like to say throw pucks on it means you're just going to throw everything at the kitchen sink, which can work at times. But when you got good goaltending, you got to get in their grill. You got to get in front of the net. You got to make it difficult for them to make a save. You can't expect goaltender to lose his blade, which will lead to a goal,
Yeah.
right? You take the breaks when you can get them, but you got to make it difficult for the goalie to make that save. So I think easier. I've liked like Austin Matthews getting into that net front. You gotta those are where you're gonna get most of your good chances, and that's where you're gonna get the higher percentage of goals, higher percentage shots. That's gonna be crucial. Carolina does not give up many great chances, so
No.
you gotta you got to earn your chances against teams like Carolina and Boston.
Dude, Boston's penalty kill is like 95% right now. That's insane.
Ridiculous.
97.4% net penalty kill.
It's unreal. It's when you're that good on special teams, and then 5-on-5 they're a really good team. Like that, you hope to at least counteract one with the other when you're going up against a team like Boston. And look, some people think we're glorifying Boston. It's kind of hard not to when they've only lost one game this season.
Yeah, and they
So
quite literally are the highest scoring team in the NHL right now.
yeah,
Like,
so
they're averaging 4.5 goals per game. So,
ridiculous.
and Toronto's only scored 5 goals in how many games, Dave?
Oh God, one, and it
So,
came up against a backup goaltender.
which is on their second night of a back-to-back, and the team sucks.
Yeah,
So
so
Toronto's got to play. They got to bring their A game. Litmus test. Can we call it a litmus? Hold on, is it? Yeah,
litmus,
we
litmus.
call it a litmus test.
Oh yeah, definitely. These two games, if you're
Absolutely
not
right.
able to be competitive again, we said if it didn't change my opinion when I said that this stretch of games was going to determine Sheldon Keefe's future, because these are the teams you have to go up against
You're right.
when the games are when the playoffs come around. So if you're not able to beat them now, go ahead.
I'm just curious what you would consider success this weekend.
Hey, look, if they split, I would take it. I would take a split. They can't lose both games, in my opinion. You gotta try to win one. Just use
What if
one,
you lose both games respectfully?
so that means they get the respect of the handshake line.
But like, you know what I mean? Like
Like if they're close, and if it's like a bat, if they're
the
if they're
effort's
close,
there, they completely dominate, but get
yeah.
goalied, let's say, but completely
I'm
dominate the play in
I'm
both games.
like, if let's say they lose one in overtime and they came close in another one, like I'm not going to say it's the end of the world. I just, you gotta have a little of a statement and try to figure out a way though. Like if you're getting goalied, it's happened quite a few times for this team, right? Like, so I like John Gibson looked like a decent goalie when they played him, even though he was not a good goalie. Like,
Oh, you mean my guy Chris Gibson?
right, exactly. So you have to find a way. Like, if I don't want to say you like lose respectively, but you have to make sure that you're competitive throughout, and that's, I
Yeah.
think, would be just an important one here. Another important thing I want to bring up, we're going to kind of close on the Leafs talk in terms of the games in the NHL, because we got a little bit of a prospect update. We actually now have, if you haven't subscribed to it, we're going to plug another show here, our Locked On NHL Prospect Show. So we have a show just on prospects now. I know a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people who are like, there's not enough like prospect driven
Yeah.
shows, content.
Prospects, draft talk, a lot of draft talk.
Like
Yeah, there's a hole in the market right now for that.
there's a lot of outlets, doing a lot of great written stuff, some stuff on Twitter, but like to have an actual full out show, it's not much out there. Well, guess what? We got you covered here on Locked On. We have the Locked On NHL podcast show, which is hosted by Hadi Kalakesh. So I was making sure I did not mess up that name. I was like sweating a little bit here when that name
I think
when
you got it, pal. I think
I
you got it.
got it. I was like, yes. I'm usually not the best with names. That's why I take this to heart.
I
when I
think people
do.
who listen to this show probably know that by now, pal.
I think so. I do think so. I mean, Mike makes sure that he gets that out when that happens. So let's hear what he had to say about the Leafs' first pick in the 2022 NHL draft, Fraser Minten, who there was a little bit of eyebrows raised when that pick was made. And you saw him in preseason, you saw him training camp, you heard a lot of good things about him. But how is he now doing now that he is back in the juniors? We'll let Hadi take it away.
And we've got Fraser Minten, the 38th overall pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round. He's got 3 goals and 7 assists for 10 points in 5 games so far for the Kamloops Blazers. So he's off to a fiery start. He's big, he's physical, he's a really, really good goal scorer. He's starting to make a lot of really smart plays. He's added a lot of playmaking flair to his game, and that's sort of what has made him sort of look like a steal so far. He's also adding layers to his thought process on the ice, which I did not expect from him at all. He's always been very good in sort of reactive situations when he has to respond to a loose puck or to receiving a pass in the slot. He makes quick decisions and makes them really well. But I hadn't seen him be this proactive and show this level of anticipation before. It's next level this season for him. He sort of predicts his teammates' routes, his opponents' routes. He compensates for that by just the right amount of delay or firing a pass or accelerating a pass through a lane before it closes, stuff like that. He's very proactive and very good in terms of anticipation so far this year. So those are the things that I think have improved the most in Fraser Minten's game and why he seems like a steal. For me, he wasn't anywhere near the 38th overall pick. So the fact that the Leafs picked him up early, according to many rankings, and he still looked this good, this looks like a steal.
Looking like a steal. We've heard that before with some Leafs prospect. Nick Robertson at one point was considered a steal.
Topi Niemela, another kid that's looking like he could be a third round steal in a way.
Like a lot of these were in the second and third rounds. And that's, I mean, considering the Leafs have been trading quite a few of their first round picks, you need to start hitting on these second and third rounders. And I think that's what's important with a guy like Fraser Minten. He's going to fill a role at some point when he's, at that stage, because he's big body. Leafs don't have many prospects who have that, big frame, can play center. He's adding the goal scoring ability. I think that's the one that surprised me because many questioned how good of a goal scorer he can be now. He's in juniors, right? So you have to kind of take that with a little bit of grain of salt because you can be a good junior scorer and it will take you some time to score at the professional level. But the important thing to hear is you're going to be hearing a lot of him because, his team, Kamloops, are going to be hosting the Memorial Cup. So he's going to be right in the thick of things, right until the end of the junior season. So we'll be having more prospect updates like that, I think, going forward. And I think we're going to try to do a little more of that on the podcast here because we know you guys love to hear about the prospects, the guys who are not with the team, because guys like Matthew Nyes, Topi Niemela, we'll be making sure to get more of an update. Their seasons are still kind of fresh and new, so we wanted to give a little bit of a body of work before we do it. And we'll have Hadi on the show as well. He'll be a great resource for us all season long, and then we have some other friends of the show who will join us as well. So, Mike,
just really quickly, there's just one other prospect that I did want to give some love to because I actually saw like some stats being tossed out there over the last couple of days. You know where I'm going with this?
I know where I'm going with this.
Where am I going?
Mr. Ty Voit?
Mr. Ty Voit of the Sarnia Sting, who was a late round pick, a 5th round pick back in 2021 by the Toronto Maple Leafs, 153rd overall. Last year, had a pretty good season up with 80 points through 67 games for the Sarnia Sting in the Ontario Hockey League. So far this year, he is on a tear, 28 points in just 13 games for the Sarnia Sting. So Ty Voit looking like a decent little player. Undersized. He's one of those undersized kids again, 5'9", $160, soaking wet. So he's, one of those smallish skill players that Maple Leafs like to kind of throw darts at the board and see if one of them hits and sticks, but off to a pretty good start. So while we were on the prospect talk, I did want to throw Ty Voit's name out there because he is off to a great start. And if you're around, if you're in Mississauga or Oshawa or, anywhere in the Ontario Hockey League and you see Sarnia's coming to town, maybe go check out Ty Voit and see what he's up to. Future Maple Leaf potentially.
Yeah, I think I've been always wanted to watch a few of these prospects, and we're not in a small city, so we don't get a chance.
We should go. We should just try and go. I'm sure we could hook it up.
I'm sure.
Hey, Leafs thing.
If any Locked On Leafs, if any of you guys want to go, we can figure it out. We can get a group together. I'm sure these junior teams would love to host us we can do a big group outing too. I would love to. I always like to watch junior hockey. I watched a lot of it, university, high school, especially when the Leafs had a lot of these prospects. I used to watch a lot of junior hockey, and I know you did too.
We could probably even do a Marlies get together at some point with some of the podcast watchers who are in the GTA area. Maybe we could try and do something. Let's figure that out on the Discord. So if you want to get involved with our little some outing that we're gonna plan. We can maybe go to a bar and then go to the game, or go to the game and go to the bar afterwards one weekend. Get on our Discord. It's Locked On Leafs on the Discord app. You can go check it out. We'll put the link down below as well in the description, or in the podcast description if you're listening to this via audio format. Yeah, we should figure that out. We should get to know some of the loyal listeners here at the Locked On Leafs podcast. We should do some sort of outing. I think that's it, Dave. I think we're gonna put a bow on today's show. Let's hope that the Leafs can have a successful weekend. It's going to be tough. It's going to be physical. It's going to be a big test. All right. They got Boston and they got Carolina. Let's see if they can come out with a couple of points here. The full 4 would be fantastic. But it's going to be a big test this weekend. Hopefully they're up to the task.
Yeah, it is going to be a very tough task for them, but it will be something that we will discuss when we are back on Monday for Monday's episode of the podcast. We'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms. Receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at @the_Morassutti, and you can follow Mike at Mickey_Canuck. And make sure you give a little follow to the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode, as I said, on Monday, where we will break down the Leafs weekend back to back and see how they came about. Hopefully more positive thoughts continue in Leafs land. Until next time, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.